Commission meeting of Monday, January 4th, 2016. And the first order of business is to approve the minutes from October 5th, 2015.
I move to approve the minutes from October 5th, 2015.
Any discussion?
Just want to see what it says in the
Last year.
Working session, that was so long
This is
ago.
all stuff that's been approved.
I'm sorry.
so-
No discussion of the meeting notes, unless it's the members of the planning commission. So it's my question.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
I would, thank you.
Do we second that?
It's been seconded, so are we ready to vote?
You do that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Now, what's the next thing? Announcements. So, we should announce that we need one more person on the
Yeah,
commission?
I actually need to get a formal resignation letter from James, but yes, we do have an opening.
And so Eric is still on?
Eric is still on,
And
and
is-
Carolina.
Carolina is
Is
still.
Still on?
Is she going to be attending meetings?
She said she was.
She said she would. All right, no public, so no public comment.
Oh, I have a couple of other
Oh,
announcements.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So first of all, I have a present for you.
Oh.
Your own spiral bound colored
Thank
copy.
you.
I can recycle
Awesome,
my
thank you.
draft.
There, you can get rid of your drafts.
Fantastic.
Just pulled it out. Connor was like, "What do you do at the meeting, Mommy?" And I'm trying to explain. And then I'm like, "These are the zoning districts." So I left it for him to look at.
He last minute, what
How
we're
old
going to be
is
working on
he?
tonight.
You could,
6.
you could color them,
Yeah.
add some colors.
Does he like maps?
I like the pictures and color.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
We haven't gotten into
cool.
maps
Good.
very much. So.
We just did.
Yeah.
Look at all these different types of lighting.
Wow.
Yeah, you guys really haven't seen too
We
many.
didn't, I didn't
or-
get to see that.
No,
I've never seen it.
this is like the deluxe version.
It is.
Very nice.
Awesome.
Great. The
Happy
light blue
Heifer
links.
Bookshop.
The light
Is
blue
it
are
hyperlinked?
links. Yep, they're
Yeah.
hyperlinks.
Awesome.
So Brandy did a great job formatting it.
Yes,
Yes, indeed.
So the other thing I wanted to announce, because it kind of relates to the land use regulations, is we are looking for 3 members for the design review committee. So this is the committee that would be looking at any development that takes place in the historic resource overlay. So if you know of anybody that has skills related to architecture, historic preservation, that kind of thing, you can either.
Do you mind emailing us just like a little like paragraph saying what you
Yeah,
just said so
absolutely.
that we could forward to appropriate people?
Yeah.
And what they do too if they're interested.
Yeah, okay. I
That'd
will
be
do that.
helpful.
So
Thank you.
the select board is taking applications for that.
And do they need
It's
to
gonna
be a
an article.
Brattleboro resident?
Believe they do.
Yes. Okay.
And they would only meet when there's an issue to meet about.
That's right. Yep. And they make recommendations to either the development review board if it's a development that has to go before them, or the zoning administrator if it can be issued.
And we're looking for people who have historic preservation backgrounds or
Historic
architecture
preservation,
background?
design,
Okay.
both.
All right.
Design, architecture, even landscape architecture would be good, because we're looking for a fit with the districts. And knowledge of the Secretary of Interior's
Oh,
design.
maybe I could get Tom to join.
It's on record now.
Windows.
Another announcement is, and I can forward this to you as well if anybody's interested. There's going to be a series of water quality public meetings on January 11th, kind of in the region. So Vermont passed a Clean Water Act I think, over the summer. And so there's going to be a lot of requirements for municipalities regarding roads and stormwater. And so there's going to be some presentations about that. One of them is more geared to public works and road foremen. That's going to be at 10 a.m. at the Townsend Town Garage. There's going to be one at 4:30 on January 11th at Brooks Memorial Library, focusing on the municipal roads stormwater permitting program that's going to be required for all towns. And then there is an evening presentation from 6:30 to 8:30 at Marlboro College Graduate School about trout and a clean water future for Vermont. So I can pass this around, but I'll also forward you the email. It's
What's the
geared-
date with the trout?
January 11th, next Monday. And it was sent out really to town conservation commissions and other people involved with natural resources. So the evening one in particular, I think, is geared more for commissions. Send that around.
On trout? Just on trout.
Trout. There's going to be some speakers from the Vermont Fish and Wildlife. It's going to go over the background of the Vermont Clean Water Act,
Can I borrow your pencil?
talking about river resiliency and air
Another
quality.
pen.
Oh, that would work too, whatever. I have a new purse and my pen hasn't made it in it.
It's co-sponsored by the Connecticut River chapter of Trout Unlimited, so that maybe is how they got their name in the title. It's not all geared towards trout. But.
Okay, I'm passing this around.
And then finally, we just wanted to let you know that you may have seen it in the comments as well. So the building on Arch Street is actually located in the floodway, which is that part of the floodplain that we don't allow substantial improvement or residential use.
Arch Street.
Arch Street is down, you know where
South?
Blue Moose Cafe is?
Yeah, is that the one that the art museum just
Yes.
bought? Okay.
Yeah, so that building is located in the floodway, and our zoning regulations don't permit residential use in the floodway. It's been the town's policy since 2007. It's been the
The
most.
floodway is the middle of the
Yeah.
river.
Yeah. They have come before the zoning, the DRB, requesting a variance, a use variance to allow residential use in the floodway. The department, as well as the town, is actually opposing that because we think it's an environmental justice kind of issue. Lots of mobile homes have been removed from the floodway. We just don't think it's suitable for residential development.
And the museum bought it?
They did.
For $1. It was
And
given
they-
to
It
them.
was given to them.
And they want to use it?
I think they wanted
have-
to use it for like auxiliary classes and things like
There's
that.
been a couple of
Performance
ideas
thing.
thrown around, but they are requesting a variance. I think there's been some thought of live work. I think that they're concerned about, well, if they can't get their project off the ground.
Well, they had a hearing,
Could
didn't they?
They did have a hearing on, in December,
And did the
and it was
DRB
continued until January 20th.
So it wasn't denied.
It wasn't denied.
Why?
It wasn't acted upon.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. It's going to be continued on January 20th. No, sorry. Yes, January 20th.
Why wasn't it acted upon?
There was some case law that had been brought up and that they wanted to understand more, so. It's because variance is strictly, there's a lot of case law in the states about that. So, just wanted to let you know our position on it, and that's going through.
I'm sorry to ask you to repeat yourself, but there was something in the middle about residences in a floodway.
Yes.
That was a different thing?
No, they would like a residential use in the floodway, and we've
Oh.
always prohibited that.
Which is the reason why, like, the Brattleboro housing
Yeah.
got rid of the housing that was in the floodway and is building the new housing.
Right.
because They were all flooded out, and I mean.
Right.
Okay.
That building in particular is like hanging over the.
Well,
It's in it. It
yeah, I think
runs
that the
through it.
justice thing. I mean, it's like the people could afford to live in the floodway, or
Well, it's interesting. I mean, prior to 2007, the town had a policy that if you were a mobile home, you couldn't be in the floodway, so you couldn't rebuild if you were damaged. And I had been working at Wyndham Regional Commission at the time, and Vermont has fair housing rules, and you can't treat a mobile home any differently than the rest. So I said, well, you got to resolve this, either allow all housing and the town chose to restrict all housing. So dates back a good amount of time. It's never been challenged, and it's not anything that we heard about in our hearings, but if they can make a variance.
It's hard to defend such an act, seems to me. Now, I had a question about this trout business. Is this, these are the same people who wanted to treat the Connecticut River like a lake. Will they be,
Well, one of them, right? David Dean.
well, yeah, but I think these other, this
What do you mean
person
treat the
also-
Connecticut River like a lake? What are you referring to?
I don't know if I'm going to get this right, but there was a legislation promoted by the state to expand the definition of a lake, and therefore the coastal,
Shoreland.
the shoreline protection to sections of the Connecticut River that have been
That are dammed.
dammed.
Yeah, okay.
And so then that would open up all these areas, including Brattleboro shorefront, to additional regulation.
So there's the Vermont Shoreland Act, it was passed maybe a couple years ago, and it regulates land use within 200 feet of a shoreland. And when they did that legislation, they had a list of all the lakes and ponds that were, that it would apply to. We looked at it, we saw Pleasant Valley Reservoir, we're like, oh, that's fine, we don't have any issues. There's been some move to administratively include the impoundment areas of the Vernon Dam, the Bellows Falls Dam, and Wilder, something up in the White River area, and administratively include them in that rule. And we have been concerned about that because we don't think it's fair public process. And we don't think it's never listed as a
It's
lake,
not only overly restrictive, it's not a fair process.
So, yeah. So yes, some of those, at least one that I know of is involved.
I just think they might bring it up.
Well,
Garner
but I
support
wonder
for it.
if it's moot at this point, because if this is new legislation that was passed, some of the protections that they were trying to get at with that may be taken care of in this new water
It's not.
quality.
No.
No.
I'm trying to think of the shoreland. No. It's a lot of fees for development. It's, the shoreland is, limits on developable area. Not all of that is the same in the stormwater requirements
Okay.
in Clean Water Act. So that's kind of still an ongoing issue that, what, I'm not sure where that determination of the Connecticut River or the Vernon Dam impoundment is a shoreland. I don't think there's been action on that. I think it was going to come back around this year. That's all I have for announcements.
Okay, so shall we have a discussion of our 2016 goals?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we have a couple projects that will be coming online here that would, one I know that will definitely involve the Planning Commission. I think we had talked about maybe our smart growth implementation assistance that we're getting from the EPA. We're going to be looking at the Whetstone corridor from about kind of a little bit east of 91, but 91 all the way to the intersection with Main Street, and we'll be looking at flood resiliency and redevelopment. How can you build smarter there, and how can you manage stormwater? The EPA has an RFP or an RFQ out right now, and they'll do the consultant selection, but we do think in February or so, we'll probably be ready to
Can you
get
say again
moving.
which section that was on?
It's it's along the Whetstone Brook. It's from, do you know where the Sorsasimo owned parcel at the end of Burr Street is? It's the big, if you're on William Street, you can look across and it's the big kind of overgrown field. So it starts there and it goes all the way to the intersection of Flat and Main Street.
Okay.
So it's sticking at Frost Place, Frost Street, a little bit of William Street, and Flat Street.
What define the boundaries of that?
What defined it?
Yeah.
It was the area that we proposed because it's all, a lot of it's floodplain and flooded during Irene. We had actually had it going a little bit longer. We had it going from the 91 overpass all the way to the Connecticut River, and the EPA had asked us to kind of shorten it up a little bit. Kind of wished we had it now. Now that there's action, down our street and stuff. Mostly because it's the low land, and we think that there's a lot of infrastructure there, and, there are residential neighborhoods, and we want to be able to support the neighborhoods.
When you're saying smart growth in a floodplain, what does that mean or look like?
How can they build resilient, how can we, so a lot of the state has said, we want you completely out of the floodplain, even the floodplain, not even just the floodway. And we realize that this is a historic part of town, there's a lot of infrastructure there, and we don't want to kind of follow that route. It's just an urban kind of area, and we don't think the state of Vermont has a really great model for how can you continue to invest in these areas that are important and have a lot of infrastructure, but do it in a smarter way. So, maybe having, I can imagine some parcels, maybe some of it's going to be open space, maybe there could be some sort of greenway link along the whetstone, and all the development is kind of pushed up closer to the street. Maybe it has to be elevated because it's in the floodplain and parking underneath, but helping people visualize how it could be.
And would it have to take into account things like stormwater runoff and stuff like that? Like that'd be part of what's
Absolutely.
in the idea?
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the kind of small stormwater improvements that can be made? So that's it.
And
There'll be a lot of planning commission
How
involved.
much was that one?
There's not a dollar.
That was the one without the dollar amount?
on that. Yeah.
We could just
Because it's assistance.
run their
It's-
credit card.
Yeah. Well, I think the EPA knows what they're
They
doing.
might
don't.
catch on. Okay.
Yeah. And then there's another one that I can't speak as well about, but there's a Route 30 corridor plan that there'll probably be a little role for the Planning Commission. So this one has to do with changing, the area is basically from the retreat, all the way down to where Saxon's River Distillery and Fulcrum Arts is, and the GMP building. And so looking at that area, given our land use regulations, given smart streets, how can we kind of change that area, make it calm the traffic? With the new bridge that's going in, with the state and that V-Trans is doing, there's going to be an overlook built under the bridge, so we're expecting that there is going to be some pull-out of traffic, and there
A
could
lot
be
more pedestrian and more
use on
pedestrian
Route 30.
friendly
Yeah.
along Route 30
Yep.
itself, and bicycle.
Yeah. So that's that Route 30 traffic study, and there's a group meeting this week to pick the consultant on that, so I'm not sure the time frame of getting started, but that will be, and I think there's some redevelopment interest in the retreat farm, and so I think there's a lot of impetus to kind of make that more pedestrian and bicycle
Yeah.
friendly.
I just saw Jason Cooper yesterday, who's been kind of the lead on the West River Trail redevelopment, and
Yep.
mentioned to him that I know there were some pedestrian bridge possibilities in that RFP, and he just started expounding on all sorts of information he has about some of the design stuff that is already,
Yeah,
he
they've
might be
done a lot.
he might be a useful resource
Yep.
on site for that, and I suggested he might get in touch with Rod. So
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if there's going to be a steering committee put together.
The overlook of the bridge is going to be really nice.
yeah, they
Where's that gonna
apparently
be?
that group negotiated something about having some kind of infrastructure put on the bottom that could have a
Where
you
can,
know,
where
something.
can we find out about the overlook under the bridge? I hadn't heard about it
Oh,
before.
I have pictures.
Yeah.
I'm on the aesthetic evaluation committee.
Oh,
Yeah,
excellent.
listen, I helped
Aesthetic.
choose the bridge design, so if you don't like it.
Don't tell you.
I just did an aesthetic evaluation at work on one of our products, and we ended up expanding our scope by like triple. So
So,
was
and
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention him as a resource
Yeah.
and potential person to pull in on the bike ped aspects of that.
So those are the two projects that we had kind of identified for planning commission involvement. There may be some limited roles for the planning commission. We think that Brattleboro Housing Partnership will probably undertake a second round of site selection. So they're doing the Red Clover Commons development behind Walgreens on Fairground. And in order to relocate everybody from Melrose, they need another site and another project. So there might be room for input on that with the planning commission. There might be a master plan for Mountain Home mobile home park, and so there might be some role for the planning commission there, at least in a commenting fashion. I haven't really been involved with that one, that's Rod's, but they're projects that our department will be involved with. So I'm interested, I guess, to hear from you. Is there anything that
I have a question. What is our role going to be with this Brownfield selection process? Because I'm
Sure.
noticing we have
That's a great
an application here.
Yeah. So what we had decided, we've gone back and forth, do we set up a separate steering committee, or do we use the planning commission to screen sites? And so we decided that it was probably easiest, and we feel comfortable with the planning commission to act as the steering committee for the program. So the role for you would be to review sites that are submitted into the program and make sure you think that they're a good fit. We'd give you updates, and you'd kind of oversee the funding and the kind of work that the department does on it.
You know, it's interesting because all the time I've been on the planning commission, we've always had this big project, like there was town plan, and then so now we're kind of got these little things, but I'm anticipating that there might be a time where we wouldn't have any business for a meeting.
I know, I was just thinking like maybe we meet bi-monthly or something.
You know, like if there's nothing to do, there's nothing to do.
Yeah. I mean,
Woohoo!
I'm not sure that I envision that, so, but certainly if that was the way the agenda is.
And the only other thing that I have in my mind is at some point there'd be a downtown master plan.
Oh, yes, thank you for mentioning that. We will be looking for grant funding sources to work on a downtown master plan. And so we at least know that the state has a pot of funding that usually there's an announcement in August. So, you know, if that was our source of funding, it would probably not gear up until November or something of 2016. But we anticipate applying to that. It's a good source of planning funds. We had funding of that for our land use regulations, not the entire park, but so that, yes, thank you.
It just seems to me that there's so many different things swirling around about redevelopment that the downtown master plan would be a nice place to put it all together.
Yeah, and we actually think the SGIA work, the Smart Growth Implementation Assistance, will actually feed really nicely into the downtown master plan. So at least take a section of it.
I don't know where this fits in or if it even does fit in with our work, but, you know, one of the pieces in the town plan and, you know, was around supporting kind of bike ped stuff, and I'm wondering if we want to somewhere in our agenda put like looking at that as like how can we more actively support that in this town as far as the planning. I mean maybe that's already kind of happened within sort of the context of all this, but I'm just remembering back when I was first scoping out Brattleboro as a place to live and was lured in part by this promise of some east-west bike path and that I know is long defunct, but anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
We lure people in all the time on that.
And that may not be a
that's
role for the
interesting.
planning commission, but I don't know. It seems sort of about the vision of like one of the things that I'm one of the statistics that I've been really struck by. My husband is very involved in this stuff, but one of the things is just about the sort of vitality of a town long term, and that younger people want to be not driving their cars, and that like the places that are attracting 20 and 30 somethings who are kind of young professionals and
It's a big
entrepreneurs and
attraction for
stuff.
us.
Yeah.
Is being in a place that's walkable and bikeable, and just thinking about our vision for how does that fit in, kind of like what you're talking about with the EPA thing, about like how do we look at how do we take a historic area that happens to be in a floodplain, how do we take a place that's kind of hilly and constrained by all our narrow roads and everything else and make it bike and
More
pedestrian
bike
friendly.
Well, it's funny because it's not just young people, because the AARP is very
Right.
interested in that as well. and
Right.
I think we
That's
still
true, too.
have it.
Yep.
Do we still have that grant money floating
No.
around for that?
No, the lights, the flashing pedestrian lights near the hospital. Yeah.
I don't
no,
know
I
if we
think
want to add that to our agenda somehow, but
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think the Conservation Commission is into a lot of trails, and there has been some interest in bicycling and the Whetstone pathway and all of that, and actually slowly kind of been able to pull together some information to find out where maybe there was an easement. I mean, it could be an interesting project to kind of get it out on a map and figure out, okay, what do we need to make this happen? Because there is quite a bit of land on the Whetstone that's owned by the town, or there was an easement, there seems to be an easement on record that had been given over to that. And could we make some sort of connection from downtown to Living Memorial Park? And even if some of it has to use streets and
yeah. I just think as sort of the group charged with visioning for the shape of the town, it seems like if anybody's gonna kind of be in charge of that, it would be us, So
yeah,
Maybe
and
we can get special goggles.
and even some of the Brownfields funding will be used for reuse planning, which is kind of broad. So we could take a section. One of the areas that I'm constantly thinking about is down on the waterfront, Depot Street and Bridge Street, and what happens when the Hinsdale Bridge is built, and how can we change that area. And the Conservation Commission has been really interested in how can we get from Bridge Street all the way down along the railroad tracks to the bridge that goes over to Hinsdale. So there's lots of bike ped connections, I think.
I think that
Sounds like planning.
I think that could be very interesting because the waterfront in Brattleboro is kind of underutilized, and I think it's a really interesting resource.
Yeah.
So that's a nice point. There could be some opportunities with that bridge.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense to kind of be planning for it now because it seems like it's far off, but it's, I mean, how slow projects move around here.
Yeah, and if we were ready,
And want some grant funding, perhaps.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if we were ready when the DOT
Yes.
Yeah.
wondered what to do next,
Right.
we'd get a leg up.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think the next step is Rod and I were gonna probably try to chart this out and think through some projects and what it'll mean. Is there anything else that interest?
That sounds good to me.
Do we want to have any sort of kind of, we've been talking through this process about all the anticipated stuff that's going to get thrown back at us about this. Do we want to just sort of see how that goes as it
Check in,
goes?
yeah.
Like, do we just
Yeah.
add it to the agenda as it arises, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're thinking that we probably want to work with it for about 6 months, and I like the idea of at least annually having some consideration to what needs to be tweaked. I don't think people should think of zoning as like carved in stone. was a lot of talk
I
about
think
that.
it's a lot less controversial than people originally thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know, maybe doing something in August or
Yeah.
something, having a check-in, because
Sure.
we do kind of have a little file going of, not tweaks yet, but are,
Yeah.
kind of like, where are some of the issues?
Great.
It's not necessarily the busiest time of year for development either, but yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Right.
And then we need another member, and we'll need another member in June,
What's in June?
right? Because
I
Carolina's
think
term is up in
Carolina,
June.
yeah, I think her term is up in June, and I think that means 9 years. I would have to check, but a board member can only serve 9 years and then it has to break, and I think she might be,
I think she is.
she may be at the 9 years.
So we need to be going about 2 people.
Yeah, I have one woman that I've been emailing with that James had sent me, and I need to follow up with her. I got a little crazy over her vacation, but she had some interest, and we're gonna grab copies. So.
Great. Okay, should we start to tackle the brownfields then?
Sure. So I thought I would do just kind of like a brief training. I'm not sure if any of you have experience with brownfields or know what a brownfield is. We've talked a lot about it probably over the last year, but just kind of on the surface.
Consider me a newbie, so
Okay.
let's go for it.
So brownfields are properties that basically have real or perceived contamination. So think Superfund but smaller. Like Superfund are just like the massive like cleanups. Brownfields are, they can still have a lot of cleanup that needs to be done because there's a lot of contamination. But it's
But superfunds are superfunds because no one's claimed
yeah.
responsibility to clean it up.
Yeah. But then a brownfield could also be like you look down the street and there's kind of an abandoned gas station and you don't know. Is there contamination there? Maybe there is, maybe there's not. Maybe there's not. And somebody who maybe wants to redevelop that property is thinking the same thing. I don't really know if there's contamination there. I don't think I want to get involved with that. So brownfields can actually be real contamination or perceived at its kind of first cut. And so what our program can do is we can provide funding to assess and investigate whether or not there's contamination on site. And that's kind of done, it's kind of a 4-step process to redevelop a brownfield site. And this is kind of the brownfields roadmap.
This is the sweetest little chart.
Isn't it? I loved it.
It's got these little booths for consulting.
Caution. Yeah. So the first step, I had just printed off a couple of slides from this, is assessing the site. And I should say that the brownfields funding is federal funding. And there was the 2002 CERCLA law, which covers Superfund but also brownfield sites, that kind of set forth environmental liability and what needs to be done. So the first step is to assess a site, and that's called a phase 1 site assessment, environmental site assessment. And we hire a qualified environmental consultant. So there's lots of firms that do this work. And I'll get back to that part. And they do kind of a desktop study of the site.
Meaning what?
But they also do have to go on site and investigate, and they need to.
It's just like it used to be like a paint plant, and therefore it would probably have this and that, or like is that what that means?
Yeah, like they'll look at Sanborn fire insurance maps from the 1800s and to whatever they can get, and they'll see what historical uses of the property were. They will. There's some database searches where they can find out if there was ever an underground storage tank, or did they store hazardous chemicals. They need to interview people who are familiar with the site. So if there's a property owner, they'll talk to that person. What did you store on site? If they can figure out who was the previous property owner, they'll do that. They actually will go and look at the site. So a lot of time with garages, there'll be drains, and they'll say, this was a garage, and here's a drain. You know, that's an environmental condition. And so at the end of that phase, so they'll compile all this information, and at the end of the phase one, they'll basically say, we think that there are recognized environmental conditions, or these are the recognized environmental conditions, and it should be further investigated. The phase one is an important document for any prospective buyer of the property, because under federal law, if they've done this and it was done to the federal standard, then they will have a liability defense protection. They won't be responsible for anything on site as long as they continue to care for it properly.
So it doesn't matter who does the phase one.
It does matter.
It does matter.
It
So
needs
the-
to be a qualified environmental professional.
No, I mean in terms of like if you had a property, a town could hire someone to do a phase one on a property,
Yes.
or the property owner could hire someone,
Yes.
And that's
or
why
the
they-
property owner could do a
prospective
phase
owner.
one and then decide to sell the property, and the phase one still exists, and then
Transfer.
right. So it's like
It doesn't necessarily transfer. So like if I own a piece of property and you're interested in buying it, so you have a phase one done, then Rachel
it.
you decide not to buy it, Rachel buys it.
But if you organized for the phase one to be done so that you could sell it, you would still have that though.
But I had been the property owner, so I'm already in the chain of liability.
Yeah, but the point of this funding that we have is that these people are going to, the people who gave us the money are going to pay for the brownfields.
Yeah.
So that also gives it some independence, because it's not done
Right.
for
But
any
like, could a
particular
current
transaction.
owner who's hoping to sell a property that could be contaminated do this, so
Yeah.
that then they can say to any prospective buyer, like, hey, this passed this.
They can, but if you're that prospective buyer, you don't actually get the protection. You need
Oh,
one done
okay.
for you. So
Okay.
um,
To protect my liability.
to protect
for my
your
purchase.
liability, you
Okay.
can't. Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
so
The prospective buyers. are
So
the
it's
ones
not
who-
necessarily like a legal attachment to the property, but it's kind of like a, hey, it's clean, and we can sort of prove it, and so it
Good if you trust that person.
right. So
Yeah.
it potentially removes some obstacles to the property being able to change hands or
And
develop.
usually
could,
you
yeah.
can't get a mortgage without it.
So usually it's the prospective buyer, it sounds like.
Yes.
Or a current use that's planning on continuing like this
Yes.
anyway. do you think?
So
The
an
if there's
example.
one that was done for one entity, then the new prospective buyer could take that report and give it to another consultant, and
Yeah.
then he could update it
Yeah.
for you at little cost.
Yes. So an example is when the town bought custom laundry for fire department expansion. We knew it had been laundry. We knew that there was a period of time when there was dry cleaning operations there, and dry cleaning operations are notoriously dirty. This one was a more modern dry cleaning operation, and it was not there for very long, and there actually was no contamination from it. But we did the phase one, or we had, I think Wyndham Regional Commission funded it through their Brownfields program. We had it done on our behalf. And then that pointed out and said, well, yeah, it was dry cleaning. So then we went on and did a phase two with some actual sampling. And that's when we turned up, yeah, no, there's no problem. But
So it got
it's
off
a,
here.
yeah. So it's typical in commercial land transactions. It's becoming more common that banks are requiring it. If you're going for financing, you're pretty much going to have it. Banks got in a lot of trouble pre-2002. Got left holding a lot of.
So is there no, I guess my question is getting at, like, what is the point at which you don't need to do a phase one because it's been done, or it's changed hands enough times, or is this just a standard operating
It's-
procedure for pretty much anything?
Well, I mean, this is voluntary participation. So if you want to buy a property and you don't want to do a phase one, that's somebody's prerogative, knowing that they might be entering a chain of liability if anything is found in the future. No. But again, a bank, if they're financing it, a bank actually might require them to
Yeah, I'm thinking from
to
the
do it.
perspective of the property, right? Like 150 years from now, it's changed hands, I don't know, 10 times, and is the property ever clean again? You know what I mean? Or
Well, I mean, at some point,
Well,
so if you cleaned
now
up
we're
a
just
property,
talking
then-
about the
Yeah,
initial, but it's gonna, if they identify contamination, then the next stage is it's going to be further investigated and ultimately cleaned up. So if it's ultimately cleaned up to the state satisfaction, you'll get a sign off.
Yep.
And that carries with the land so that somebody said at this point in time
It was
that it was
clean.
now
Yes.
clean.
Right, there's some
Right, so then
documented
that kind
history
of-
for the property that it's
Yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So phase one site assessments, they generally run between $3,000 and $5,000, and they can be done pretty expediently, like 3 weeks' time. The next slide is investigating the site. So if there were recognized environmental conditions identified, then, and you want to go ahead with the purchase and, redevelopment, you're probably going to proceed with a phase 2 environmental site assessment. And that's where they actually are testing the soils, groundwater. They can do air quality testing. They can do building materials, so for asbestos and lead and PCB, lead paint, PCB caulking. Those are the kind of things that can happen during a phase 2. And in that, you again use a qualified environmental professional, and they put together a work plan that gets approved by the EPA and by the Vermont DEC. And it's really helpful to know what the redevelopment plan may be, because they can target the assessment in a way that's cost effective rather than just like testing everywhere. But it is a pretty holistic approach to testing on the site. And there's different technologies that could be useful. Some can give you real-time results, so then you move to the next spot and you can actually delineate the area of contamination if it exists. So that's phase 2. That is widely variable in cost depending on what the historical uses were and what the concerns are. I've seen some close to 100,000.
Is there a maximum that we would give to any one applicant?
We haven't restricted it. I mean, I think that's a good conversation to have here. If we felt that, I've been involved with Wyndham Regional Commission's Brownfields program, and kind of depended on the status of the funds and what the cost came back at. That would be a consideration for the commission to make.
Because we have 200,000 in each category, right?
It actually, after we take out some of the costs for running the program, it ends up with $175,500 in each pot. So we have funding for hazardous substance and funding for petroleum.
So we could have 2 expensive sites in each. It could be.
It could be.
Could do
It could be. It could be.
Or we could decide to do more smaller things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question, and it's a good thing to consider, especially as we go out to consultants to have them bid on the work. And like if a cost comes back really high, it would be like, we'll wait out to take this to the commission.
It's an interesting thing too, because I'm assuming we're just going to respond to these as they roll in, and so it's sort of like early bird gets the worm in this case, I guess.
I'm reading this application. I'm getting ahead of myself. But, I don't see an amount that they're asking for.
Because they don't know how much it costs. We have to go out with the work.
And then get proposals. for-
So we pre-qualified in the fall, we pre-qualified 3 firms. It's Terracon, LE Environmental, and Sangor and Head. And so if we accepted a site and we got a phase 1, we'd go out with like a mini bid, a 2-pager. We'd just say, can you give us back your cost estimate and your timeline? Because we know they're qualified to do the
Are we
work.
asking them to give us a bid for their phase 1?
This,
Not this, not the
Yeah.
one that we're talking about tonight.
this
I'll
one that
get
we're
into
talking about tonight is a really good illustration of what Sue was just explaining in terms of the Brownfield program, because it talks about the prior use and why it might be contaminated, and it's a nice illustration.
Is there a period of time that the money has to be used within? Like, yeah.
3 years.
Okay.
So
we-
September 2018.
So then it's either like first come, first serve, and we use it up, or we may even need to go identify sites to like do them on that we would anticipate might need it done, or?
Part of the grant funding is to do outreach. Wyndham Regional Commission they've done a lot of work in Brattleboro, so a lot of the realtors and people involved with land development know that there's a program around. So we feel like we're a little bit at an advantage. We don't necessarily have to go out and create this inventory and really approach people. But I do need to do some outreach with the development community to make sure that they know that the funding's there.
How is this interfacing, or is it not, with the Wyndham Regional Commission's Brownfield program?
It's not, they have limited assessment funds. They've applied for more. But if they do get awarded assessment funds, their priority is going to be outside of Brattleboro.
So do they have funds for cleanup?
They do have funds for cleanup. So that's probably the way it interfaces the most right now. That and Susan McMahon and I might do some outreach together.
Okay.
Which is logical. Yeah. So after, it's been evaluated and investigated, there's a next step, which is looking at analyzing the different brownfield cleanup actions that can be taken. In Vermont, it's called an ABCA, analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives. And in those reports, the environmental consultant kind of looks at three options of how can we, best deal with this. And then it gets reviewed, and then the preferred cleanup action plan is created. So you kind of look at alternatives, and then you actually create the corrective action plan. And then you go to remediation. And all through the process, we'll be working with the EPA and with Vermont DEC. They're signing off on reports. And then we're also working with the property owner and the prospective purchaser, because it needs to be, the cleanup plan has to be based on what do they want to do with the property. You don't do a cleanup plan if you don't know. And so it's, most effective use of the funds if there's kind of a development plan in place. So the town wanted to build the transportation center. So we knew that was what the desired outcome was going to be and what the redevelopment was going to be. So kind of moves smoother. Commonwealth Dairy, that was assessed, investigated. They had engineering plans, so they could work with the environmental consultant to do what needed to be done. So that's kind of where the best use of funds comes in, when you know what you're going to do. So that's kind of the steps in Brownfields, or it's what we can fund. The phase 1 assessment, the phase 2, the looking at the alternatives, and then creating the corrective action plan. And like I said, we have 2 pots of money, hazardous substance and petroleum. Eligibility is a bit different if you're a petroleum site, so like a former gas station or maybe an auto repair shop, where you're presumed you're going to have petroleum like contamination. That one is a little trickier on being able to use funds. So if you're looking at, is the property owner viable and liable, and you're looking at 2 property owners, so I own the site, Liz wants to buy it, they're going to first look at me and say, well, she's viable because she still owns it. Or no, she's liable because she's in the chain. Is she viable? If I'm still operating a gas station, or, I've got money and they can determine that, then they're going to say she's viable, so you can't spend the money. It could be that I am not viable, but maybe Kathy owned it before me, so they can look at Kathy and, oh, Kathy owns 50 gas stations throughout Vermont. She's certainly viable.
No, she has to clean it up.
Well, they would go to her for cleanup, so therefore you couldn't use the funds on the site. So that one's a little bit trickier, and we work with the DEC on those sites. But
DEC stands for?
Oh, sorry,
Vermont
Vermont
Environment.
Department of Environmental Conservation. We have a hazardous waste management group. So, let me see. I don't think I had anything else on that. Does that kind of make sense? So, the next thing, I guess I thought before I brought you the site, I had put together some site selection criteria. I mean, I thought we should probably be on the page of kind of what sites do we think are important ones to, what are the criteria that we should be looking at to determine if it's a good use of our funds. So there's threshold criteria, and those are, has to meet the definition of a brownfield site. And so that basically means if the EPA is I'm gonna do paperwork with the EPA. If they say yes, then it's a brownfield. Or in a petroleum site, if Vermont DEC says yes, then we're good, it'll meet that. To number 2 there, we're gonna have some paperwork. We have models provided by the Wyndham Regional Commission that we just need to tweak a little bit and have our legal staff look at. But a property owner will sign off allowing access to the site, understanding what their requirements are, responsibilities, and obligations are. So if a property owner does not sign that form, then we're not going to spend our money.
Does this question of like liable and viable, is that part of what defines it as a brownfield? Or does that come into play? Or how does that come into play?
It doesn't define a brownfield, it defines brownfield eligibility to use the funds though.
Right, so does that need to be part of the selection criteria?
I thought about that, about property owner status, but it can be so variable. So there are kind of exceptions to some rules with the petroleum eligibility, so I didn't want it to be
All right.
like a complete deal breaker without being able to check it out.
Work
I mean, we
through
could
it.
add as a threshold criteria that we get sign off by EPA and Vermont DEC, just to be clear. Because if we don't get that, we can't.
You can't
work on it.
proceed.
So we could add that.
Right, is there a legal, like, are there legal considerations for how you have to like write the criteria?
No.
No.
No, this is just something that we can work with, and we can tailor it as we go. We'll find out. It may or may not be working.
Okay.
What is a new market tax credit eligible census tract?
That is low income census tracts. Our new market tax credits are a development tool in these low income census tracts. Brooks House used them. You can get money back for your redevelopment. Ron's the person to answer the new market tax credit better than me, but we have our zone in Brattleboro. Our track is pretty wide, so it's this green.
It's based on census criteria.
Yeah.
Sure.
It has to do with income.
Oh,
So it takes into downtown Canal Street.
Okay.
It's basically, what is that, like voting
South-
district 2 or something?
Southeast.
Brattleboro.
Yeah. And we wrote about Brattleboro being eligible for new market tax credits, or that census tract being eligible in the grant, so that's why that's in there. But I am conscious that what that first criteria on access and location says is that we've got industrial areas in the north part of town, and we also have Putney Road in the commercial area. So, I mean, that's, this access and location criteria, I think we can think about tweaking it to include those.
Yeah. Yeah, I think probably more options seems better than having it limited. The other thing, the way this is written, the idea is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like we would need to check off 4 of these for it to be a majority. Would it make sense to rank each of these choices? Like, for access and location, it's a 1 to 5 points, and then, or is that just complicating it?
I think I think you're better off being more fluid with them because the sites could be so different that the way that it's written, satisfy a majority, gives us the opportunity to be flexible with the property.
I think if we had a number of applications all coming in at the same time, that we had to be ranking against each
Yeah.
other, having a point system would make sense. But I
It's
think that if
probably
we're
not
going to
that
be dealing with this on a
situation.
rolling basis, and we're more looking for, is this appropriate use or not
Yeah.
appropriate
Okay.
use of the funds, I don't know. We'll need
It's
it.
a good, I had debated that because at Wyndham Regional Commission, they do use a scoring criteria. And we've just found it a little bit difficult to deal with exactly for the reason if you don't have another site to compare it to or multiple sites. It's like you go through the exercise and that's
But it almost
great,
seems
but you
arbitrary.
don't, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not like you're ranking it against something else. So it's kind of, maybe calling it ranking criteria isn't the right word. but-
Right, I just feel like there might be a situation where like the only three of these apply, but they're very extreme, right? In that particular whatever category or
So
something.
you're
you know?
feeling like somebody could not get a majority and
Right, like maybe there's
would miss
a
an
known or
opportunity.
suspected environmental condition that's very bad, but it doesn't meet access and location, and it's not compatible with the land use regulations, and it's not a local priority, you know.
You could call them selection criteria
And just leave that
and
sentence
take the
off.
word majority out and must satisfy key elements of this criteria, these criteria. It's a lot more subjective, but that's
But
what
that's
we
probably
would be
fine.
discussing.
I mean, it's an interesting conundrum, right? It's like if you have you have this money to potentially spend, and you have only a few possible people, then I think you want to be just more
You wanna-
liberal with
you
your,
want to give it to them.
right. But if we
Yeah.
ended up having like 20 people come in here with like, we would actually need a real criteria for how we decide how that money's going to get spent. So, yeah.
But I think the main one is that we want to give money to properties that we think need to be developed, not only for themselves, but for the town as a
Greatest,
whole.
greatest benefit.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, you know, the message is like, if there's a bad site, but it's not, there's no readiness to redevelop it, then why do the research? Or if it's not compatible with the land use, I mean, like, you know, I think these make sense. I don't mind us taking out that sentence and just calling it selection criteria, but, so we can just be maximally flexible, but.
Yeah.
I'm also just, I don't know, I'm okay with them the way they are. And if it ends up being a problem,
Yeah, this is not a,
then we can solve it.
That's true.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I think in my experience, the readiness of redevelopment has been, especially when, you know, we're a new program, so we might be in a different place, but with the Wyndham Regional Commission, because it's an established program, the readiness for redevelopment was big for our steering committee on that, because why spend the money? I mean, and you know it when you see it. You know, somebody might come in, and sometimes you know when you see it when, you know, it's a private land transaction and they're just trying to get, you know, a couple grand out of you to help facilitate it, but they don't necessarily need it, because there is a part where this is standard in commercial land transactions, so. And then you see a nonprofit or the municipality come in looking for it.
Okay.
So you can make the changes that you suggested to start with, I guess, and then.
Sure.
So the site that we received an application from is New England Youth Theater. So and I gave you a map because it's a complex site. So they own, we're looking at the livery building. If you look at this map.
Yeah, these two use different terminology,
Do they? Okay.
so I'm gonna need your
Yeah.
help
Sure.
understanding.
Okay, so this is Elm Street. This is Elm Street, Canal Street's up here, and Elm Street comes down, and you might be familiar with the big brick building on the corner of Flat and Elm Street. That is called Tri-State Auto. Right next to it, to the south of it, is a red painted building. That's called the Livery Building, and that's the property that we're talking about.
And
Just the livery.
they're
just
looking
the
to
livery.
to take that down, not also take down Tri-State Auto.
No, Tri-State Auto, I'm sure they would love to take it down. It's very expensive. That building is contaminated as
Yeah.
well. There is
That was when
PCB.
Natalie Blake looked
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah.
So do they own all of these buildings?
They
in
do.
This little set here?
And they're all on different properties. So they own their building, the
Which is
theater.
the big one.
They
Yep.
own Livery, and then the big brick building.
Okay,
building
so
next to it, to
the
the
brick
livery.
building is the Tri-State Auto on this, on the Stevens plan?
Yes.
And the
Okay.
Phelps building is?
The Phelps building is the one in between.
This one.
Yes.
Wait, I'm confused.
Wait, where's the,
So-
brick building existing, Phelps building. Oh, I see. So this plan
they're calling
is
Phelps
having
building.
removed the livery building. The livery building
Yes.
was in here,
Yes.
and they want to remove it. Okay,
And this
okay.
is the
I'm sorry.
Phelps.
I'm confused.
Building.
I see.
This is the
Okay,
theater.
so-
This is-
Phelps
Gotcha.
building.
Brick
Tri-State
building.
That's okay, that's that one. This is with livery removed, and this is Tri-State, the brick
Yes.
existing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they want to remove the livery building and put up like a Greek theater and an outdoor classroom.
Sounds lovely.
Somewhat. They have had a phase 1 and a phase 2, and they have actually had some corrective action planning done on this site. But they need to amend the corrective action plan, and
Did they get
They-
the funds from Wyndham Regional to do
yes.
that or something? Okay.
Yep, Wyndham Regional Commission
Uh-huh.
had, they were accepted into that program.
Okay.
And there is some more contaminant delineation, I think, that needs to be done as part of the corrective action planning, and that is, there were PCBs found in basement soils, which PCBs are federally regulated and are a bit complex to maneuver. Not maneuver, I'm not saying you need to get around it, but it's got a different testing protocol. They have actually received a $200,000 cleanup grant, so they will be ready to implement their plan once they've amended the corrective action plan. And I do think that they're looking for some more funding, but these are all activities that could be done under their cleanup plan or their cleanup funding, but we suspect it's going to take quite a bit to clean up this site, that using our program to help them helps preserve their $200,000 to actually do the cleanup.
And are you, and what you are talking about, is that all in relation to this livery building only,
Yes.
or other aspects
Yes.
of their property?
Just
Okay.
the livery building. New England Youth Theater, you notice over the summer they did some
Yeah.
landscaping and stuff. That was part of a cleanup. They had EPA funds to do that. They had PHs in the soil and maybe some lead and arsenic as well. So they used cleanup funding to do that. And again, the Tri-State Auto building is just really expensive. It's kind of been mothballed at this point until they know what the future reuse will be. And
So
there's
the
some,
PCBs are in the basement of the livery building?
yes, there's PCBs in a portion. There's like a north part and a south part. I think they're just in a portion of one of the buildings, one of the basements.
What was in that site that was like?
Auto repair, carriage repair, auto
then auto
repair.
Yeah,
repair.
it says here,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. This is a form that this is also the site nomination form. This is one of the forms that I've created for the program. So if this also doesn't work for you, if you feel like you're not getting enough information,
It
I think
is-
Naomi did a good job filling it out.
it is surmised that the site became contaminated by spills and releases that took place during past industrial use of the building, especially paint manufacturing and vehicular repair.
Would this come out of petroleum then? Is contaminated with petroleum, or would it come out of the other one?
I think it can come out of petroleum. On my initial conversation with my project manager at EPA, he was thinking hazardous, but Susan McMahon actually gave me a petroleum determination from the state. So I think
I got that
Seems
today.
like it
so
would be
I-
better to use petroleum since it's more restricted
It's
if we
more,
can.
yeah.
Yes,
for targeted.
absolutely. That would be the route I would go. I was also, Naomi, the applicant, she was out of the country last week, and I think she still might be. I need to check in with her because when I was reading the reports, it seemed to indicate that there might need to be some more building material testing done prior to demolition. So what we'd be looking at funding here would be a amended corrective action plan. There would be some PCB testing involved with it. And then if she needs it, potentially building materials testing, which she
So it
did.
sounds like this would not be one of the more extensive kind of funding requests since they've already done their thing, or is that?
I'm hoping not. PCB testing you have to do it in like a 10 by 10 grid fashion.
Okay.
So
So it could be complex.
it could be, but the good news is that there's some people at the EPA who've already been talking about it. One of our, we'll put it out to bid, but one of our pre-qualified consultants has actually done work on the site. So, there's, the state and EPA have been very involved and they kind of know what needs to be done on the site. So I think that's going to help. We're not just going to be doing a science experiment. We need to.
I'm just curious, what do they use the Phelps building for?
The Phelps building, there's a business in there.
Oh.
That is not owned by them.
Oh, that's not owned by them, okay.
Oh, who owns that? How do you access that?
The Phelps from
That's
Elm
kind of
Street.
down a little slope, really.
Oh,
I think the guy does doors or windows or something.
Okay.
and that's not owned by them.
Not owned by them. This site is in the floodplain. So actually removing a building is a good thing.
Yeah.
We actually, separate of this application, have had a conversation with the landscape architect. They're aware of its floodplain nature and moving fill and that kind of thing. So the state floodplain people are aware of it. They know it's a brownfield. It'll be a little complex.
So brownfield in a floodplain.
It must be.
Yeah.
Often the
It's a
case.
good
Yeah, it's
place
often
for
the
you to
case.
put
when,
a
when these
brownfield.
buildings
often the case.
flood, you gotta wonder what floated out of there during Irene, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yucky.
And they did, in talking to them about their concept, or at least the landscape architect, it was kind of, it is on Elm Street, and they need to provide some security and to the people using the site. It's kind of I think it's a nice design. It's got some
It's
barrier.
a debris barrier.
But, that could also change a little bit depending on the contamination found, and where they can put fill in. So the contamination on the site, it's kind of asbestos, lead, PAHs, arsenic, and PCB.
How high are these walls?
42
42
inches.
So this
That's
form
for
is
teenagers to hang out at night.
all very nice, but I'm just not seeing what it is that they're asking for.
On the front, she's asking for type of assessment support. She checked off cleanup planning.
So then the next step, like say we approve this and we're like, yes, let's go on this one. Then this gets sent to those 3 firms?
I put out, it won't be this. I'll do a little RFP and give them about a week to respond. And then we'll probably be looking, it would be great to have one member of the planning commission that could review it. And then we'll pick this consultant. It'll be pretty quick. We'll pick a consultant to do the work on it, and then they'll get going. So once the consultant's working on it, it's not.
There's nothing
very
being done,
hands-on.
right? That we're just then spending the money on them to.
So,
Yeah.
so
I mean, we'll see
you're
the
saying
report
that
and look at it.
as a planning commission, you're suggesting that we choose these, and then the staff basically will choose the which firm.
I think we would probably like to have one planning commissioner to review with us, but they're short, they're 2 pages. We can just have a little phone conversation. Yeah,
Okay.
it'd be good
Seems
to
like a
have
good use of the
1 or 2 planning commissioners.
I'm good to approve this one.
So I think a vote would be.
I move
All right.
I'll
I'll take a motion.
motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the nomination from NEYT for use of Brownfields funds.
Second.
Any discussion?
Only that I think I misread the height. It's 42 inches high wall with a 42-inch metal picket above it.
Got it.
So it'd be double
Oh,
42
I see.
inches.
So 8 inches.
84 inches. That's like 7 feet. So that's actually quite high fence.
Got it. Okay.
I like
Okay.
that they have some greenery in front of it.
Probably need that to block sound also, if they're gonna be using it, like, they need to block sound from the road.
Okay.
Do we have a vote?
Yay.
Yes.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Motion carried.
Okay. Cool. Might it be of interest to you in the future, like when we have the environmental consultant and they've done the work to, have a presentation of it, or maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah,
is
sounds
that-
interesting.
I mean, anything that I
Yes.
can help.
I'm interested.
Yeah,
to-
because this is such a good example that we could learn so much from. This
Yeah, and I
proceeding.
think also just kind of for the public record, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it would be good, I think more information is
Yeah.
better in terms of
Yeah.
explaining how the money gets spent.
I don't think we need an extensive presentation,
Yeah.
but some follow-up,
Yeah.
like, information would be useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure when you put out the RFP, it'll be clear because it says here that the organization seeks assessment assistance to create a cleanup plan and corrective action plan amendment.
Yes.
But I don't really know why.
Because they had a corrective action plan that was previously done, but it needed some, in order to finalize it, I think it needed some more pieces of testing. And I will be clear when I send it out. I've got some notes from a conversation I had with EPA
Great.
folks.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, have we done all that we needed to do tonight?
I'm all done.
Yeah, well, now take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?